So next we've got Dan with us. Dan is the founder of Filament PHP. So if you've not used that, you should be using that. But Dan, what was the first version of Laravel that you ever used?
So I think I started working with Laravel 5.5 first, and I actually was introduced to Laravel through the October CMS community. So October CMS is a platform that uses Laravel internally, and I was looking at how that worked internally to provide PRs and also customize it for my apps, and that's how I got into Laravel.
That's interesting. We've used October CMS on a few projects. Okay, that's interesting. So then, what has been the most interesting feature that you've worked on at Filament, or what have you enjoyed most?
Aside from like the huge packages that I had to build substantially from the start, more recently we added two-factor authentication into Filament, and that actually required us to use a lot of the existing features that we've built into Filament. So all of the UI for setting up two-factor authentication, managing recovery codes, revoking that, was all built using the Filament components internally. So it wasn't any custom HTML or views that we built for it. So building that was an interesting challenge because we had to be able to support multiple two-factor providers. But also it was really fun for me to build because we actually were able to use those Filament components, and it made me realize how far we've come, that we could actually build full UIs that weren't just traditional tables or forms using Filament. So
why should people be using Filament instead of like hand rolling their own admin panel? What's the big thing that really makes it stand out?
Especially now when an AI agent can like one-shot an admin panel for you in a lot of cases. If you think about like all of the revisions that we've gone through for every single component inside the Filament core, so there are so many things that you have to think about for each component. And the first pass that you have, either writing the code by hand or with an agent, is never going to have thought of all of those edge cases that we've already worked through. Think about like accessibility, but also responsive design, making sure that like all of the components are consistently working together and use a cohesive design language as well. So nowadays, I recommend using Filament for admin panels because of that jump start that you get. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting with a really well-tested and well thought out framework that your agent or yourself can work within the bounds of to build that.
Awesome. And I want more based on like what you just said. Then you talked about AI. Blueprint is something you've just not long released. It's a tool that you can use to help your AI agents build better components. And you've recently done a security skill to kind of audit those codes. I guess why you find the need to do this? What's kind of driven the kind of particularly the auditing one with the skill?
So originally we created Blueprint because I was chatting with loads of community members, and this was back in January, December of last year as well. And there were a lot of common themes coming up in our conversations about maybe an AI agent's getting the wrong namespace for a particular component, or it's not considering that Filament uses 2-column layouts by default. So it means that they were putting some sort of form field in the form and not considering that, and it kind of looks a bit weird and there's not enough width. So essentially, I was looking at the sort of patterns that I could see, the mistakes that agents were making, and trying to prevent those from happening in the first place so that the initial output was better. Also doing that in a considerate way and not just polluting your entire chat context with a ton of rules. So like really focusing on our plans. For the security score specifically, that's a recent addition that I've made because recently we've had a lot more interest in how Filament is on the security perspective. And we've been adding a lot of notices into our documentation regarding like how to use Filament securely. Because a lot of the time, the framework is so flexible that you also, as a developer, need to be really conscious about how you're using it and how you're configuring it. And it's not something that we can protect you against in the same way that in Laravel, you're able to write insecure code as well, right? So the idea is that instead of asking an agent to just scan your code base file by file for issues, or potential issues, we give it essentially like a set of patterns to match for within your code base. And it does that across all files in your code base at once. So find all of the places where you are rendering raw HTML instead of escaped HTML. We can do that with a pattern.
Yeah.
And then we can then look at each of those cases and find out if it is actually a problem, because it's only a problem, for example, if you use user input in that environment. So basically, it's a set of about 10 or 15 checks to perform, each with a pattern. And that pattern is able to then inform the agent if the product is secure. And that, combined with the documentation notices, basically mean that we've covered all bases there. Because agents aren't going to go and read the docs every single time they want to do something. They're just going to one-shot it. But I think being able to claw back a bit of that control and understand if your app is actually secure is quite useful.
Yeah, that's really important. I feel awesome. Yeah, great. So, well, thanks for the time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks. Cheers.